Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Sabrina, and on behalf of Choice, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Curriculum Shifts in Library Strategy, Insights from Emerging Higher Ed Trends, which is sponsored by Clarivate. This session is one in a series of sponsored webinars from Choice that addresses new ideas and developments of interest to the academic library community. I'll just put a couple links in the chat where you can register for upcoming webinars and watch previous webinar recordings. Before we get started, I'd like to point out just a few features of the webinar software. All attendees who join the presentation are automatically muted and your cameras are off, so don't worry about generating any noise or feedback. We've got that taken care of for you. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. To adjust the size of the slides or video, you can use the divider in the middle of the screen to slide the sizes to your liking. We are using the Q&A feature today. Please use it to submit any questions or comments for our speakers. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation, so please do type your questions into the Q&A module as they occur to you. You can also use the upvote feature to highlight questions you'd like or would like to be addressed. Also, there's closed captioning available for today's session. To toggle the automated captions on or off, please use the Show Captions button on the bottom panel of your screen. You can also turn on automated translation for the captions by clicking the arrow button, toggling on translation, and selecting your preferred language. Last, please note that we are recording today's program, and everyone who registered should receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording and to today's slides. And with that, we are ready to get started, so I will hand it over to Michelle.
Thank you so much, and hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Michelle Tomasi, and I'm a part of the product marketing team here at Clarivate. We're so excited to chat with you today about this topic, curriculum shifts in library strategy, with insights from emerging higher ed trends. We have a fantastic panel for you today, so if we go to the next slide, I'll introduce our speakers. Starting with Emily. Emily is a senior research advisor in higher education at Hanover Research. In her role, she uses her research expertise and data analytics skills to partner with national universities across the higher education landscape to better understand their goals and priorities and design research methodologies accordingly. Lee Wright is the product manager for ebook content and subscriptions in the books division at Clarivate. She's a librarian holding her degree from Rutgers, and she has worked in and around academic publishing and the library industry for about 20 years. And then finally, we have Tash Edmonds. Tash is a senior director of product management in the books division at Clarivate. She's also a qualified librarian. She brings nearly 2 decades of experience and keenly understands the library's pain points, the role of publishers, and the dynamic landscape within the global books marketplace. So thank you in advance to our speakers today. If we go to the next slide, we'll take a quick look at our agenda. So Emily is going to start by sharing some of the research from Hanover within the higher education space, looking at some of the major trends we're seeing and how that's impacting areas like degree programs and career fields. Then Lee and Tash will talk through some examples of how we're using this data and other sources and research to inform our curation to ensure that libraries have the content they need to keep pace with these trends and support emerging areas of study. So with that, I'll hand it over to Emily to get us started.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michelle. So excited to really talk a bit more about the trends within higher education. To give a bit of background on Hanover Research and our work more broadly, we are a custom market research firm serving a little over 600 higher education institutions within the US and internationally as well. Some of our main focus areas really relate to some of the critical planning questions that we see on the right-hand side of our screen here. One of the major ones being the degree offerings and really ensuring that our institutions are evolving and meeting the needs of the market, really based upon the different innovations and trends that we're seeing, not only within technologies, but then also more broadly within the labor market and society at large. Some of the additional elements that we really focus in on are in relation to the academic program piece and the return on investment of those programs, how to really showcase the value proposition of these programs, and then of course as well thinking about the broader economic impact that our institutions are ultimately providing to their communities and really ensuring that students who are attending universities are having the utmost best experience that they possibly can. Focusing in though on the core of what we've seen this year, I wanted to highlight a few of the broader trends that we've highlighted at Hanover within our initial trends report for the year. Broadly speaking, and this certainly I think was not going to be a surprise to anyone, the biggest theme that we saw by far is a year of change. And so really understanding that there were a lot of moving pieces that are occurring this year, and really having the best picture of the landscape to begin to react and proceed accordingly. I'll focus in on a couple of these trends most specifically as we get into our overview today, but just wanted to highlight the top 5 here. First, thinking about academic program innovations, and again, wanting to reflect the demand of the career-aligned market that we're seeing to really ensure that we are striving to showcase that return on investment. I think we'll spend a lot of time here just in terms of talking about those innovations and what that can ultimately look like. But as we think about some of the additional implications that we're seeing within higher education, really having institutions refine their strategies when it comes to access and aid, understanding that there are broader financial realities that higher education leaders are considering as well, and understanding how might that help them reshape their focuses as well as the budgets that are at their disposal. And then thinking about how these then start to feed into the overall student support resources, how we're really evolving and shaping those supports to ensure that we are really helping individuals move forward with their challenges and move past their barriers. The last being wanting to continue to lean on broader brand strength within institutions to, again, really ensure that we're able to drive home the value proposition, knowing that there is a tighter market in general. Thinking about the academic programming piece, thinking about the broader innovations, knowing that curricular expansion and revitalization is certainly an area in which we are focusing a lot of our attention. I wanted to highlight a bit of our work when it comes to modernizing and revitalizing these programs. I think that this is really key to a lot of the work that not only Hanover does, but what we're seeing within the broader environment these days. And so really taking a look at both the portfolio review as well as the programmatic review. Both very vital, but a bit different in of itself when we think about some of the evaluation techniques and how we might think about the broader picture versus the more granular approach. When we're thinking about that broader portfolio review, really what we're hoping to do is evaluate the entire breadth of an institution's set of offerings. The idea here being that we want to ensure that we're addressing any of the gaps that might occur within a portfolio, understanding how the broader institution is really assisting the needs of the local community or the regional area in which it's supporting, and ultimately really able to see where there might be some opportunities for the institution to expand as far as their programmatic approaches and even modalities as well. When we're looking at more of the programmatic review, this is really where we're looking at one specific program at a time or potentially a broader field. But ultimately, the idea here is that we're really wanting to look at an individual academic program and really ultimately understand what are some of those skill-based learning, simple pathways that we really need to consider as it relates to the broader program here. What are some of the strengths and challenges within this field, and how can we really look around at the market in which we are offering this program, the environment more broadly, and understand, is there a potential need for redesign if this is a current or existing program? Is this ultimately operating within the competitive market in a positive way? And then, of course, if it is a new program, really ensuring that the program is hitting on those environment needs. More to the point, as we think about the assessing of the existing academic programs, these are just a couple of the specific metrics that I wanted to highlight, or key points that I wanted to highlight as you think about some of the challenges that might occur when you are considering the assessment of your programs. Some of these really focus in on how to conduct this work in a way that really allows us to hone in on what the specific metrics and objectives might be, and how we're really ensuring that we're able to capture the broad perspective of, again, the environment, the stakeholders, and the general local area that we're, again, trying to support. So some of the best practices that we ultimately highlight One is ensuring that you're picking metrics based upon the objective that you have. So really wanting to define for yourself, if we are looking at your programs and understanding if it is healthy and what some of the curricular aspects should be given any of the innovations of the day. This is really where we start to identify, well, what are those specific metrics that will help tell that story? Consider the availability and accuracy of the data needed for each metric. That's certainly a really important part to make sure that we're able to accurately capture and assess what that metric and the value is there. Engaging stakeholders early and often, and this is anything from some of the internal stakeholders who are part of creating the curricular structure of a program, defining the need for a program within the institution, but then also speaking directly to the audiences that a program may best benefit or serve. We really want to think about including benchmarks when possible so we can have that comparison point to understand the broader contextual landscape in which we're operating in. And then, of course, we ultimately want to recognize that this is both an art and a science. I like to call it a bit of a dance here, in which we are taking a look at the core metrics that help define the market and the world in which we are living, but really wanting to ensure we allow space for some additional opportunities or additional metrics or components that really focus in on more of the broader need, mission of an institution or a college as well. And so knowing more broadly how some of the academic development work takes shape and what some of the initial ideas might be when we are thinking about the emerging trends. Oh, and I apologize, but the slides just disappeared for me.
Okay,
Oh,
should have them, Emily.
thank you so much.
Mhm.
So now that we've set a little bit more of the broader landscape and really wanting to understand how we potentially function within the academic landscape and where some of the data points might come from when we're thinking about the curricular innovations, wanted to start to go over the emerging trends when we are thinking about, well, what is ultimately shaping the market and what is shaping some of the data that we're looking at as we are conducting these reviews. And so I wanted to highlight a report that Hanover put out recently in which we're really looking at some of the programs that are recently announced. I'm just wanting to see some of the initial trends and awareness that the market appears to have as it relates to what type of offerings are currently changing, and then what are these new offerings, what are they representing? And so a variety of the majority, I should say, of the offerings that we reviewed here, again, this is just within one of the, within August, we see that there is a large number of bachelor programs, and a variety of them are some of the new programs of interest. So rather than a redesign or a potential new modality. And so certainly time of year is really important here for us to take into consideration. The start of a new academic year is around the time that this data was pulled. And so really wanting to consider that as we think about some of the new innovations or the new offerings that we're seeing institutions roll out. But more broadly, I think that this helps us really understand that there is still a focus within the undergraduate area, while still also considering the master's and doctoral level as well. And then additionally, as we think about just the type of new offerings here, knowing that a large majority of those that are published are going to be in some of the new programs, especially at the start of the year, to really ensure that they can start enrolling students, begin to recruit individuals. This ultimately makes sense given the point in time in which we're looking at. Taking this a bit broader, one of the innovations and ever-evolving conversations when we think about how a program can be offered, what some of the innovations, expansions, or revitalizations could be, part of that factors into modality. And so I wanted to highlight briefly just some of the projected interest as far as the student modality within 2025, and continuing to see that while there is a desire, especially within those traditional age undergraduate students, for that fully on-campus experience, there is still a continual increased in, or maybe not increased, but a continual interest in those expanded and more flexible modalities, especially as we get into the adult undergraduates as well as graduate students. I would say, as we have seen within the last couple of years within our research at Hanover, those traditional aged undergraduate students had been moving a little bit more towards that more traditional in-person experience coming out of the pandemic, in which we were so online. But now I think we are really reaching that equilibrium here, in which we are starting to see the accessibility that online and flexible modalities ultimately offer. And so the continuation that this is going to likely be a trend that we'll see over time. And as we think about the offerings that we have within the environment, or your institution has within the environment, really important to consider, well, who are we ultimately trying to serve within this program? And then how can we ensure that the modality is constructed that's really mindful of those individuals as well? Thinking about some of the other elements that are really impacting higher education and the programs that we're seeing, certainly not necessarily the elephant in the room, but the big topic, hot topic that I know that we have all been talking about this year is certainly artificial intelligence. And so AI has certainly been woven into many different parts of higher education. Most obvious, at least I think initially, is thinking about how institutions are evolving to offer programs that are specifically about artificial intelligence. But we're seeing a lot of movement as well as how institutions can ensure that they're infusing AI competencies for their students into general education and core curricular courses for their students, so that this is part of the skill set that they are ultimately learning, so they can continue to be really valuable within the labor market overall. But then, of course, as we think about the faculty and staff side, there's a lot of additional competencies that they're being asked to focus in on and develop themselves, that really allow them to be the model instructors, and how they can start to infuse AI within their own broader teaching, as well as some of the additional responsibilities that they might have on campus as well. And so these are just a few highlights that we've pulled out from our research, just in terms of specifically, let's say on the student side, the certain conceptual foundations that are needed, the tools that we're really asking individuals to have experience with, how they're really thinking about the critical evaluation of AI, any of the ethical and legal reasoning that individuals need to really understand how to best apply artificial intelligence. And then certainly thinking about the collaborative mindset as well that AI can ultimately bring for a student. And on the faculty and staff side, really wanting to ensure that artificial intelligence is, again, used as that tool that can help empower students, and really ensure that we are driving or utilizing AI to drive our curricular structure to really meet the needs of the students, how this can evolve teaching and learning, and then ultimately as well, how might we have to think about assessments to ensure that we're keeping this in mind as well. And so based upon some of the broader perspectives that I've brought to the table here, just in terms of some of the emerging trends that we're seeing happen within the broader landscape, I wanted to highlight some of those now more specific high growth fields based upon what we're seeing as far as the fastest growing degree programs, as well as looking at the labor market for the fastest growing occupations as well. And so within our degree programs here, we see a wide range of different fields and programmatic areas that are rising to the top when it comes to the different degree levels of interest here. So we're looking across at the bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degree programs here, certainly seeing a couple here that rise to the top that, again, make a bit of sense in terms of more of the STEM-focused, hard skills related elements, financial analytics, data science, cloud computing, all related elements that are certainly continuing to drive the broader growth that we're seeing within each of these categories here within the bachelor's degree area. And then as we think about the master's and doctoral degrees at more of the graduate level, there's certainly a wide range just in terms of the individual programs that are rising to the top. Certainly within the doctoral degree programs, we're seeing a number of the fields that are related to a professional degree. So thinking about those occupational therapists, nursing administration as far as a D&P potential related program, but then also seeing a good emerging of some of the business related degrees, organizational leadership, things of that nature that potentially are evolving as we think about those master's degrees that have historically been within those disciplines, how they're continuing to evolve into some of the doctoral level education that is ultimately provided as well. And then looking at the occupations, again, it's really interesting to see a bit of the alignment here in terms of the fastest growing occupations and how it connects back to the fastest growing degrees. Again, driving home that value proposition, that return on investment that we're really seeing that students are looking for. Employment outcomes is one of the dominant ways that we're ultimately able to do that. And so as we see here, just as far as some of the top growing occupations that would require a degree, nurse practitioners certainly high up on the list here, but then we also see a wide number of other health related fields, and then of course the data science or other computing technical related fields here as well. I also wanted to highlight briefly just some of the rapidly rising areas of study. These are certainly areas in which we're seeing a spike in the growth, and we're starting to see some of the emerging volume of interest here across the board. And so really breaking it down by both the undergraduate and graduate level, what that looks like within the bachelor's degree as well as the master's degree area. Again, I think a lot of this really hits home as far as what we've seen thus far, and certainly also responding to the broader labor market landscape and needs that are presented within the broader environment in which we're operating in. But when we think about some of the learning science piece, the technology and information management area, sports communication, these are our top areas as far as some of the bachelor's degrees. And then as we think about the master's degrees, certainly, again, a couple that are really focused in, but more on those data analytics and evaluation perspective. How are we really thinking about the evolving STEM-related fields here and how this continues to evolve at the master's degree level? Last but not least, I wanted to highlight a bit on as it relates to some of the online search trends that we're seeing, as well as some of the international tertiary education trends that we're seeing. So first on the online search trends piece, again, I think a lot of the search volume that we're seeing here kind of mirrors what we're seeing as far as the number of or percent growth within the student demand perspective within the fastest growing degrees, as well as within the labor market projections as well. But again, nursing continues to rise to the top here, along with some of the other broader areas of interest across business. And then, of course, some of the other emerging areas as it relates to social work. And then what are some of the additional details that we can see here as far as the computer science, psychology. And ultimately, this is dependent upon individuals who are searching for these broader topics as it relates to higher education, what programs they're wanting to pursue. And this is ultimately based on Google search trend analytics across the last year or so, from February 2024 to February 2025. Final piece here highlighting the international tertiary related elements or tertiary education trends that we're seeing more broadly. Just wanted to highlight a few of the countries that were ultimately of interest to our clients based upon the students that were ultimately migrating or mobilizing from each of these countries respectively. One of the, again, the broader or major takeaways here is just the presence of that those STEM fields as far as the broader demand and what individuals are ultimately interested in if they do come to study, and what that study ultimately looks like for them. And so I think that this, again, connects back to what we're seeing within the US domestic market as far as the high growth trends across both the labor market, but then broader programmatic degrees that we're seeing within the national landscape there. And so with that, I will transition it over to Lee to talk a little bit more about the curriculum shifts.
All right. Thank you, Emily. That was fantastic. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here with us today. So now we're going to shift and look a little bit at our ebook subscriptions here at ProQuest and how data such as what Emily gathers and shared with us is helping to inform our collection development strategy for our products. I thought I would start with just a general overview of our kind of framework that we like to follow when developing our subscription collections. So I'm actually going to start on the right this time. Some of you may be familiar with this slide. I've presented it before. One key thing that we're really looking for when choosing titles for our subscription products is trending topics or areas of study. So here we just have listed some of the trends that we've seen in recent years and that we've kept an eye out for. And that's everything from evergreen topics like first year experience type titles, study skills, research methods, composition skills, that sort of thing. That's always popular. But then we also have a selection of things that kind of come and go. So in recent years, obviously technology, as Emily said, everything about data science, artificial intelligence, and so on has been huge. Distance education, technology and education, how that's having an impact. Health and medicine, those have been huge. And then other areas of the sciences, including sustainability and environmental science, have been really key in the last few years. So where do we get that information on trending topics and areas of study? To begin with, we do look for hard data. So Emily's organization has been a fantastic resource for us for several years now. They put out such great reports every year. So we do look at the kind of things that she just shared with us. We also look at some government statistics. So for example, the UK's government education and training statistics, as well as the US National Center for Education Statistics, and a few other countries. We also talk to our community a lot. So we take feedback from you guys out in the field. We take our customer requests very seriously, explore them more fully. And we also kind of keep an eye on the news for curriculum trends that we see happening. I follow both Chronicle of Higher Education and Inside Higher Ed just to see kind of what's happening, in the general atmosphere in higher education. So now let's talk specifically how this relates to a couple of our products to kind of illustrate how we put this into practice. So we'll start by talking about Academic Complete, which for those of you who aren't familiar, this is our flagship product. It's been around for over 20 years. It has a specific scholarly focus and has almost 250,000 titles now. It does cover all academic disciplines, so great coverage as well as all levels of study. So from lower undergraduate or two-year schools and technical schools all the way up through doctoral studies. And so I wanted to look at what have we added in 2025. We just did our last update for the year, and we like to kind of track this by breaking it down into 10 kind of core subject areas. So here, this is how our 10 core subject areas broke down this year, and highlighted at the top are technically the 6 top areas. Normally I would do 5, but education and health and medicine were tied for the sheer amount of content that we added this year. And they're also highlighted because these are areas that tie in with some of the data that we've looked at in order to make these selections. So one resource that I did not mention yet was our own dissertations and theses database. So here at ProQuest, we do have a product that's an index of global dissertations and theses that have been filed and completed in any given year. So we like to look at that data every year and see where have the higher levels of education been trending. So where are people pursuing those master's and doctoral studies? And so for this year, 8 of these top 10 subject areas in dissertations and theses aligned with those top subject areas on the previous slide of what we added to Academic Complete. We like to look at this to make sure that we're kind of dovetailing with where people are studying, where are the most in-demand areas of study. And you can see the only areas that did not rank among our highest title counts this year were business and interdisciplinary studies. And yes, business is always evergreen. Sometimes it's just a tough year, or maybe we put more emphasis on those more trending areas. Next things that we looked at, actually going to jump ahead to this slide. We look at Hanover Research's information, as I mentioned. So this is just one of the key areas that Emily mentioned. We do look at everything that she shared with you. I chose to illustrate this one about the search volume because we're not only considering where have people been studying for the last year, but what might be the up and coming areas. We do try to anticipate where future demand might be as well. So taking that whole picture together kind of drives our selections for our products. And so I like this one because it kind of showed a mix. As Emily mentioned, a lot of those in-demand areas where the top bachelor's degrees were trending are represented here with the nursing at the top, with a lot of those STEM areas. But there was a little bit of the humanities in here as well. So we're seeing maybe that's where some trends are going. And on the left-hand side, I've highlighted, these are the fields of study that are on that illustration on the right, and highlighted in purple are the areas where we had strong growth in our title counts in academic complete for this year. And when looking at similar information, the National Center for Education Statistics, the bachelor's degrees conferred for 2023 to 2024, that was the most recent data available. So when we look at which areas bachelor's degrees were most highly handed out, looking at those graduation rates, highlighted in purple are all of the areas where, again, we had strong growth in academic complete in 2025. So this just illustrating we were focusing on these areas, making sure that we have content speaking to these really popular bachelor degree fields. And then if we take a backwards look, we can see we do track usage of our titles. We do like to take a look, check ourselves, make sure that we're making solid selections. So for 2024, academic complete saw usage on 99% of the titles. So that tells me we are doing a good job with our collection development. This is content that our customers are interested in, that their patrons do want to use. This is, a really valuable tool for everyone to have access to. And so now I wanted to take a look and illustrate how this data is kind of feeding into our newest product, ProQuest eBooks. So you may have heard about this in the news. This is our latest and our largest subscription. It's the newest one joining our family. It does have over 700,000 titles. Similar to Academic Complete, it has a very strong scholarly focus, but with this title count, we were able to expand out a little bit. So we are covering a little bit more of leisure reading, and we also haven't been incorporating quite a bit more general nonfiction into here as well to help support patrons' personal lives. We were hearing a lot from our community that students were looking for things to support their lives outside the classroom, whether that be career development or upskilling information, personal finance, nutrition, personal health and wellness titles, all kinds of things like that to kind of help support their general life. So that is some of what is in ProQuest eBooks. But I did want to kind of show for the scholarly portion of the database, which accounts for, I want to say 90% of the database, we are looking at these trends again to see what should we be including in here. So ProQuest eBooks launched at the beginning of the year in Q1, and so we've had 3 updates since then. We are adding fresh content every quarter. So we do have some growth stats that we can look at. And so again, here we have our top 5 subject areas that we've added to ProQuest eBooks this year. Again, science and technology and health and medicine coming in really strong. Which is great, speaks to those trending bachelor's degrees, as well as some of those trending higher levels of study, also strong in the social sciences. And that's actually where you're going to find some of those books on things like sustainability or public health as well. And mental health sometimes falls into that area, as well as health and medicine. And so again, kind of looking at how ProQuest eBooks is aligning with our dissertations and theses index. Similar to Academic Complete, we have strong alignment. 7 of the 10 subject areas that have been added to dissertations and theses this year were covered by the titles that we added to ProQuest eBooks. In addition to business and interdisciplinary studies, education, didn't quite make the mark in terms of where those degrees were trending this year and what we added to ProQuest ebooks. Something we'll keep an eye on for next year. It is new, so we are still tweaking our approach a little bit on this. But the fact that we hit 7 out of 10 of these subject areas tells me that, you know, we were making some smart choices. And here again, we have the same information as before from the academic complete slides. On the left is the Hanover information. So again, we've highlighted, you know, those kind of trending degrees that people are looking into and how that aligns with what we added to ProQuest ebooks. And then on the right, we have the National Center for Education Statistics graduation information. So again, highlighted in purple is where we had strong growth in ProQuest ebooks this year. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tash to talk a little bit more about our product lineup and how we kind of work on that to try and meet everyone's needs. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Lee. That was fantastic. And also thanks to Emily as well for starting the session off. And I hope that you're starting to see how we are, you know, connecting the dots in terms of looking at these trending areas and then kind of making direct correlations with what we curate and what we select and then put into our collections and put those out to libraries. I hope we're kind of giving you a little bit of a sneak behind the curtain, really, in terms of what the curation process looks like. And it's not really just a case of throwing a lot of titles in there. You know, the aim really, and always is, to make sure we are meeting the demands and the needs of an ever-changing and a very fast-evolving education market. So we've spoken a little bit about our proprietary projects with Academic Complete and ProQuest ebooks, but that philosophy also transfers to the partners that we choose to work with. And one of those long-standing partners has been O'Reilly. So many of you may have known previous projects as named as Safari, but a few years ago it was re-imaged and now O'Reilly for Higher Education and O'Reilly for Public Libraries. So what's really unique about this project is it really is looking at what's happening in industry, especially in the areas of business and technology, and curating not only books content, but video content, audio, and a multi and varied ways of learning paths in terms of courses, micro-learning as well. You know, and Emily touched on that. You know, we think about the different ways now that students and researchers are accessing and ingesting content, and also how that's being embedded into their education programs. So one of the main reasons that we work with O'Reilly is because they're so authoritative on these subject areas and the way in which the platform evolves, not just in terms of content, but in terms of user behavior and how users are accessing and finding content. You know, Emily touched on AI as well, and how that is influencing, maybe even disrupting kind of the education stream. And, you know, a real kind of a need really for users to be using it in a transparent and a responsible way. And one of the things that we've been so pleased with O'Reilly is that, you know, they recognise that users are interacting with Gen AI, and they've embedded that as well into their platform, but again in a very transparent and a very sort of clear way in terms of users being able to ask questions, you know, to the platform. And you know, how do I use a pivot table, or how do I find out more about coding, and being able to then directly link to the source, which obviously we all know is absolutely key. So yeah, that's just a little bit about the O'Reilly platform, but in the same vein, in terms of the collection development kind of ethos around the platform, you know, we kind of look at the same. Sorry, my slides are jumping around a bit. We look at the same sort of data and looking at what's sort of trending. So again, with the Hanover Research data that's on the left, looking at, really trending topics like business and management, computer science and accounting. And then we look at the National Centre for Education, and, we can see that there's really, really great coverage, on the O'Reilly platform around this, with business, marketing, computer and information sciences. And a lot of that is kind of around things like machine learning, and seeing kind of the growth and the coverage of titles that are on there. And, again, this platform is really, really influenced and curated by those kind of industry experts. So, we're hoping, and we're very confident that we are kind of reflecting kind of where, the sector is going for those particular subject areas. And just finally, just to kind of, because we all love a book cover, we did pull some data in terms of the top sort of used titles. And again, they really are aligning with what we're seeing in terms of those trending degree courses. So things around machine learning, cybersecurity, financial theory, project management, they are becoming reoccurring titles that we kind of see being used and interacted with by the users on the platform. So I hope that has been an interesting sort of journey for you all. So you can see, the amazing work that Emily and her team are doing at Hanover, and how that directly impacts and influences the work that we're doing here at Clarivate on the books front as well. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Michelle, now, just to close out this session. But thank you very much for listening.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tash. And thank you, Lee and Emily as well. That was a fantastic presentation. I really learned a lot. So thank you so much for your time. And thank you to everyone here for joining us today. We hope you found this useful. And we do have some resources to share if you would like to scan this QR code or access this after the presentation. We'll also upload the slides and recording here, so you're more than welcome to access those materials afterwards. So now we'll move over to Q&A. And I do see a great question that's already come in through the Q&A. So I'll read this aloud, and then anyone on the panel who wants to jump in, feel free to do so. In relation to the fastest growing degree programs being seen, is there a worry that humanities and social sciences are almost non-existent on those graphs? And what does that mean for library strategy moving forward?
I can take a first stab at this just in terms of our perspective. One of the things that I will highlight as well is that we're really looking at the fastest growing. And so that's really key there. I did filter out fields that had less than a certain number or less than a certain volume, so that we're really able to capture those that have both the volume and growth. But that's something that I would highlight and showcase, is that the humanities and social sciences, while they might not be growing or as fast paced, they still have quite a high volume, if you will, do still have at least a stable amount of interest. And so it's something that I wouldn't suggest or would say that we need to ignore entirely. It's more that as we start to evolve and think about what are some of the continual pressing needs within the interests of potential individuals, this is really where we see the growth and continuation going. But it's not to ignore the other areas or to say that they are not relevant or not useful or helpful. I do think that that's something that we at Hanover focus on a lot, is how can we really start to assist in showcasing how humanities and social sciences are directly tied to a lot of the occupation outcomes that we saw within the slides as well, how you can tie something, thinking about artificial intelligence again, critical thinking is such a core part of being able to understand how to utilize artificial intelligence, how to really understand it at its core concept. And that can and ultimately does come back to some of the main humanities and social sciences that we teach within more the liberal arts related fields. But that's just my initial thoughts, and just in terms of some of the programs or focus areas there. Lee, Tasha, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts to add there too.
Yeah, I do. Especially just to follow up to what you mentioned around the critical thinking piece. And I don't know if people on the call have seen it, but the Future Jobs report that was published by the Economic Forum, and some of the skills that they talked about being of most importance, especially when you think about emerging technologies and AI, was exactly what Emily said. It's critical thinking, and a lot of those skills really are honed and perfected, within the humanities subject areas. So that's one piece, but kind of thinking about what we're seeing as well, and we didn't really kind of delve into that too much. And Lee and I could talk about this for hours. Is where we see usage as well is still incredibly strong in the humanities areas on our platforms, and kind of especially post pandemic, we did sort of see kind of more biology and virology, those types of subject areas. But we are really still seeing really strong usage in areas like the humanities, social sciences, and those interdisciplinary areas as well, gender studies, things around inclusion and diversity. They continue to be very strong. And I find that incredibly heartening as well. So, Lee, I don't know if you had anything else to add.
Yeah, I had a couple thoughts on that. One, I love that you mentioned, when we look at our usage trends of what's in our databases, that's a key stat that we look at also. Because keep in mind, just because STEM degrees are trending, within STEM programs, sometimes students are required to take some humanities courses. In probably the last decade or so, the concept of the digital humanities have become fairly strong. So there has been some push to acknowledge that the humanities have something to offer to the STEM fields or to computer science. And again, talking about, artificial intelligence, how critical thinking is so important. I also think it's kind of telling that something like communication studies was on that list of top bachelor's degrees, accounting for 4% of all bachelor's degrees. So clearly, I think that ties in with technology as well. How do we communicate with each other? How do we communicate with our technology? And how does it communicate with us? That's all very important. And then finally, this is one of the reasons that I chose to focus on that graph of what degrees people are searching for. Remember, I mentioned that kind of looking forward to see where the next trends might be, as we're finding out that some, tech jobs are being replaced. It's all over the news this week that there have been some huge layoffs at places like Amazon. Because they're trying to replace jobs with AI. So the question then becomes, okay, so what's the next big field? And I think some people are looking at humanities because traditionally it has served as a strong base for things like law school or for business degrees. I've worked with many people who have MBAs or JDs whose undergrad was history or literature. And I also think that it ties into with social services and healthcare as well. A lot of people will get one degree in the humanities, but then go on to work in social work or psychology. So I think that's why you're seeing some of those trends in what people are searching for, and the humanities are kind of coming up. As far as for the libraries, I would say it's just a constant balancing act, and to just keep an eye on all these different things. Look at what's being used in your library and kind of balance that against, what are the degree trends at your own institution, which, degree programs are growing, and just kind of try to keep those plates spinning in that balance carefully, just by keeping an eye on all that stuff. But in no way do I think the humanities are going to die. I mean, maybe I'm biased. I was a lit major too, but I am heartened by seeing some of this information come through with usage and searching and so on. Fantastic question. Thank you to whoever posed it.
Yes, thank you. That was a great question to start us off. Emily, I have a question for you. So you talked about how students are looking for a strong return on investment for their degrees. Are there any other factors determining how students are choosing their degrees or higher education paths? Is this focus on ROI a recent trend or something that's always present? If you could speak to that a little bit.
Absolutely. So I think that, yes, there certainly are other factors that students look at when they are choosing what path they want to take within higher education as they think about their post-secondary career. What does that look like? And then, of course, as well, what degrees are they ultimately interested in? I would say that students, especially those who are of your traditional undergraduate students, they are looking for what their interests are. It does take them a little bit of time when they get into school to explore a bit. We still see a lot of movement for individuals who come in thinking that they are wanting X, but they end up majoring in Y. And so there's still a natural movement there. I think that the ROI related conversations comes back to some of the other elements that are part of a student's decision, which is the finance piece. How much is a higher education going to cost individuals? And that again affects the path that they might take. We are seeing a continual steady stream of individuals who are going to community college first and then transferring into a four-year university if they wish to have a four-year degree. So that's one of the elements or pathways that we do see that individuals are taking advantage of more and more, especially in areas in which that pathway is commonly built up and accessible and communicated really well. The other aspect that I would say that is a major driver is really thinking about their family, friends, what type of conversations are they having with other individuals. A lot of the core decision making when it comes to an individual's next steps within post-secondary education, it comes back to the conversations that they're having with those trusted individuals. And so still coming back to that core group at the end of the day. Yes, if parents are a part of that group or guardians, certainly there's a push for the return on investment piece because it does give you the so what a little bit. But I would say that we're still seeing a lot of decision making being made based upon an experience or how close to home students can be, and still a natural curiosity when students are thinking about their next steps. We like to call degrees either they're the discovery degrees or they are the destination degrees, and you can have both within your institution, and you should have both. And so there's still as many students who are discovering the degrees that they're interested in, as many as there are that have that core destination in mind. Could be driven by ROI, could be driven by just pure interest as well. So just a initial set of thoughts there, but certainly not a new topic here, but absolutely one that we're continuing to see as far as consistency goes.
Perfect. Thank you, Emily. Lee, I had a question for you as well. So, you talked about how our curation kind of aligns with Hanover and other data sources like NCES. I know you also take a lot of community feedback into consideration. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about, what are some of the other areas that libraries kind of request more content in, and how do you sort of gather that feedback and take that into consideration?
Yeah, so the requests for more holistic resources and how do we take feedback into account comes from a variety of places. We do have a content advisory board. We have done for several years now, so that's where we initially repeatedly got the feedback that some fiction, leisure reading, and as I said, more general nonfiction for students' personal lives. That's where that kind of first cropped up during the pandemic. But it continued to be requested even after lockdown ended. So that's why we kind of took that seriously and thought about, okay, how can we meet that need? We also get feedback via email. The sales team will forward me feedback from their customer meetings. Sometimes they will just hand out my email address and I'll have one-on-one conversations with customers. And then, I do attend many conferences, and I've heard it there too. At last year's Charleston conference, I was in a session where a whole conversation started up around non-scholarly materials in the academic library. One poor librarian said she had to buy the Harry Potter series 7 times the year before because so many students were reading it just for fun. So when we were designing our new product, I mentioned ProQuest eBooks has a bunch of this content, and this was really our solution to meet that need. For years, I kind of struggled with the idea of adding it to Academic Complete, which is supposed to be scholarly focused. so how could we make room for it? So the thought of making a much, much larger collection where we could make some space for those kinds of materials and help librarians meet that kind of community need at their institution, in addition to the academic needs, that's really how we decided to, go about that. And we continue to solicit feedback. If we have a little too much of it, we'll pull it back. If people want to see more in a certain area within that space, we'll certainly work on adding more. It's always a work in progress. Our subscriptions are living things. So, to anyone on the call, I, encourage you to reach out if you have some thoughts or suggestions around what you might like to see in our ebook subscriptions. We're always looking at that and even taking into account ideas for maybe new product development in the future too. It's all about trying to, as Tash said, align with what our customer base most wants and needs, and make sure that students are getting the tools and the content that they need to support them in all aspects of their studies.
Perfect. Thank you, Lee. We have a few more minutes. If anyone has any last questions, feel free to put those in the Q&A. In the meantime, panelists, do you have any final comments?
No, just probably just kind of coming back to the point around humanities, because I think at the moment, we are hearing so much about kind of new technologies and AI and a focus, or a refocus on STEM, and we also we see kind of some courses being cut. I'm seeing that in institutions in the UK. I know it's happening kind of across the pond in North America as well. But I do think that with those kind of advances in technology, that there comes lots of opportunities. But I think there still is a really, really key place for the humanities kind of in this space as well. And again, I think just because we see things that are emerging, I think there are also courses and areas of research and subjects that do and will always remain kind of like core and fundamental to individuals being successful in the world of work and also in their education choices. So I just wanted to kind of double down on that, because we have spoken a lot today about tech and business, and we can't deny that there are, just because there are so many advances and it's changing the way the industry is being shaped and the way it's evolving, it would be probably wrong of us to kind of not touch on that. But also I think as well, just reiterating the fact that and I'm biased as well because I'm a classical lit major, that there is still that space for collection development in the humanities.
And just to piggyback off what Tosh was saying as well, I think some of the importance of the work that we discussed in terms of how do you think about reinvigorating your curriculum. It's still having those core competencies. It's still having those core elements of what makes a humanities or liberal arts related field or topic area. It's showcasing how outcomes ultimately can be changed and how you can apply these skills in a variety of different ways. And I think it's best, how can we best communicate that? That's really what we're seeing as far as the reinvigoration goes, and not necessarily to scare off based upon some of the emerging trends that we're seeing, but more in terms of how can we continue to lead forward with that data-informed perspective as well.
Perfect. We did have another question just come into the Q&A. How can developing countries cater to the needs of their students, making the most of AI, but also with reliability and credibility? What are the prospects of the legal field there?
I can speak to it more from a library point of view, just because I do a lot of work with libraries from around the world. And I will say that I think when it comes to kind of responsible use of AI, I think it's always about what's the use case for it, and kind of really clearly defining that. So, from our experience, there are probably sort of two areas where we see students, sometimes struggle or have challenges with, and that's kind of searching very, very large aggregated databases that are full of a lot of content. They have a research topic and they're not necessarily sure how to navigate through. So, there's some great tools I mean, there's tools that we've developed and have rolled out that kind of help with that sort of search experience. But it's always guiding the user back to the full text and for that to be linked. And again, I think it's always about making sure that you're referencing the original source, because I know that causes, great concern when it comes to the concept of AI and the multiple tools that are out there. But then also I think it's about deepening and reaffirming engagement and understanding of the content that the user is exploring, is interrogating really. So is this the right content? How does this help my research? And then how can I go on and develop my understanding of not just that particular research topic, but the subject as a whole. So those tend to be the two use cases that libraries are really trying to hone in on, kind of understanding and ease of search really. So I think, and the thing is, and I think we need to be honest, it's evolving every day, and libraries a lot of the time have said to me, I don't know if we can keep up with the changes, but I do think it really is about finding those use cases for your student community, and then working with trusted sources, and making sure that kind of IP is protected. And I think librarians as just human beings, that tends to be kind of like a core sort of value in terms of the integrity of the original source of content and the author. We're seeing every day, every week, there's a lot of cases out there. So I think legislation is also changing as well, as kind of new use cases, or in some cases misuse of content and AI are coming up. The legal field is playing catch up as well in terms of, permitted use of content, what does that mean for original works, the role of the publisher and the aggregator as well. So it's kind of fast paced and kind of ever changing. But in the library world, I think librarians are kind of really core and central to the conversations that are happening.
Great, thank you, Tash. We do have another question around AI. I don't know if you have any insight into this, but we can also add some AI resources to our page that you see here to follow up on some of these questions. So the question is, what opportunities does Clarivate have in influencing the development and implementation of ethical AI integrated research data management infrastructures? I don't know if you have anything on that, Tash. If not, we can definitely follow up with this individual.
Yeah, no, I can just speak briefly on that. So we kind of know the risks that are out there with AI, and the opportunities, but also the challenges that are presented. So we have deeply invested in a couple of multiple sort of streams. One of them being an AI advisory council, and that includes librarians, academics, experts from around the world who are helping shape, whether that's being development partners for the projects that we're rolling out, just in terms of conversations of how we expand and how we develop our own internal AI policies. That's really key. And that ensures that there's transparency, and again ensures that we're aligning with those predefined and the most key use cases for AI. So it's not AI for the sake of AI. So that's really, really key. Also, as those groups act as again, like I said, sort of test partners, so we can test out kind of, like I said, beta testing and early adopters. So if we do find any kind of bumps in any of the projects, then we have the library community to kind of keep us straight on that. So we really appreciate that. And what we're also starting to do is, with some of our projects that we've rolled out, there are mechanisms for user feedback as well. So end users can start to tell us about how they are interacting and how they're finding those tools. So it's great to have the librarian and the publishers and industry feedback, but kind of the end users as well. How are they using it, and is it fitting suiting the purpose of what's needed? I think it would be great. We have, and I think today we published the Pulse of the Library report, and this is a great report that has surveyed thousands of librarians from around the world on how they're interacting and how they feel about AI, emerging technologies. So I think we'd really happy to share some links to that survey, because it is literally hot off the press and was released today. And we also have partnered on some micro-learning courses around AI as well that are free to use. So we'd be happy to share those resources as well.
All right. Well, I think that wraps us up for today. Thank you so much to our panelists for your time and for sharing your insights. Thank you so much to everyone on the line here for your great questions and for spending the hour with us. I'll pass it back over to Sabrina to close us out.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. I'll just say thanks so much to Emily, Lee, Tash, and Michelle for taking the time to speak with us today. And thank you to our attendees for your questions and your comments. I'd like to remind our viewers that we did record today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from Choice with links to the recording and to today's slides. Also, if you have a few minutes after the presentation to fill out a brief survey, we would really appreciate it. So thanks again to all of you out there for joining us. We hope you learned something new from the webinar and hope to see you again soon on another session.